Hello class. We are going to cover the software you need to install to complete this course. There are 3 applications you're going to need to download. The first is Unity Hub, which will let you install Unity through it. The next is a 3D modeling application called Blender, specifically version 2.8 or above. Then we're going to need Substance Source, and within that we can get Substance Painter and Substance Designer. First, navigate to your preferred search engine and search for Unity. Find the link that directs you to unity.com, which should say something similar to Unity Real-Time Development Platform. Go ahead and click it. Now, the Unity website changes from time to time, so you might need to do a little bit of searching. But for right now, if we click on Get Started, it'll take us to the page for the download. Once again, go ahead and click Get Started. Next, click on Individual and choose the personal version. I do not recommend using the student version with your Rowan email account due to issues with Rowan's ClearPass system and logging in. Besides, I'm going to be using the personal edition in class, and it's best you follow along with the same software I'll be using. Go ahead and click Get Started. It will then route you to first-time users. Click Start here. Go ahead and agree and download. You'll then download the Unity Hub Setup.exe. Make sure it's the Unity Hub setup that you're downloading and not an actual version of Unity yet. Once finished, go ahead and open up the executable. Go ahead and agree to the license agreement and install it to your preferred directory. Once Unity Hub has installed, go ahead and open it. Yours is going to look a little bit different than mine, and that's because you don't have any projects or versions of Unity installed yet. If you're prompted to sign into your account, now's the time to create one. I recommend you don't use your own email address, and this has something to do with the Duo authentication process hijacking the login part of Unity. Create your account and then log in. After you have created an account, it might then promote you to install here. Otherwise, on this sidebar, you'll notice an Installs tab. Now, before we actually install anything, if you click on this gear or widget at the top, you can choose where the installs will actually be located on your computer. This is important if you use a solid-state drive or have limited space on one of the ones you're using. Unity is a performance-intensive application, and installing it on an SSD will have benefits if you have one. The Unity install, by default, will be a little under 5 gigs depending upon what you select, so make sure you choose the correct location on your hard drive. Within this Installs tab are all the versions of Unity that you have installed. Unity is rapidly evolving with multiple releases a year. However, we will be using a specific long-term support version for this course, and that is 2019.4 long-term support. Just make sure it's 2019.4 long-term support. Here you can see I have 2019.4.1 F1 long-term support. Go ahead and click on Add. This will show you a list of the official latest releases for Unity. Unity only lists the current release, which is a 2020 version, as well as the long-term support releases for the prior 2 years. As I said, we're going to be targeting the 2019 version of Unity, so make sure you choose whatever long-term support version is for 2019. It is required for you to use this 2019.4 long-term support version for the class. I will not accept any assignments from other versions of Unity. Using the wrong version can cause lots of conflicts and issues when you give me your project files, and will ultimately result in you getting a 0 for that grade. Go ahead and click Next. And in here you can choose the different modules. This is where Unity can expand in size drastically. I recommend not selecting any of these modules unless, of course, you happen to be using a Linux or Mac computer, in which case you should select the correct version for what you're doing. I do, however, recommend you install the documentation. This documentation is offline, which means even if you're in a pinch and you can't connect to the internet, you can still look up documentation and information about Unity to continue doing your work. However, do note that the Unity documentation that is offline is not as updated as the latest version online. Therefore, it's always a good idea to log on the internet and double check something if things aren't working right to make sure there wasn't a glitch in the documentation. However, at this point, Unity has existed for so long, most of the errors are only in new features you probably won't be using in this course. Once you're finished, hit Done. Unity will begin installing your application. This can take some time, and it is downloading it from the internet. So if you're on a slow connection, this is something you might want to do overnight and then come back to. Now, once Unity is finished installing, I recommend just creating a new template project that you'll delete immediately after generation just to make sure Unity works on your system. Go back to the Projects panel, click on New, and choose with the dropdown which version you're going to be targeting. Once you do that, a prompt similar to this will show up. Since we're going to be deleting this project instantly, I recommend just putting it on your desktop so you can delete it afterwards, and the project name doesn't matter either. All you're interested in doing is creating a new 3D project, having Unity generate it, and then have Unity open so that you see that everything renders properly and you don't get any errors in between those steps. The next step is to install our 3D modeling application. And when I say 3D modeling application, I don't mean it's limited to that. We're going to be using Blender, specifically any version after 2.8 to do our 3D modeling work. And Blender can do a lot more as well. But for this class, we're mainly going to be focusing on generating 3D models, creating vertex information, and of course, UVs and texture assignment. Go to your favorite search engine and go ahead and type in Blender. Here, blender.org is the link we're after. The current version is 2.83.3 long-term support. Go ahead and click on Download Blender. There are two ways to install Blender. One of them is by clicking the Download Blender link above for the Windows installer. This will start a download. The problem with the installer is, if you're using multiple versions of Blender, or you need to support different versions of Blender because of different projects you happen to be working on, well, you're not going to want to do this. Instead, let's go back to this page and go to the previous version section here. If we go into the previous version section right here, we're going to get a large list of all the different versions of Blender. If you're familiar with Blender, then you know that between version 2.79 and 2.80, there was a major change to the user interface. While in this class we will not be using earlier versions of Blender, you might need to use them for maybe a clinic project or something else. In order to support multiple versions, you'll want to go to the version you want. So let's say I need 2.82. And instead of downloading the MSI installer, I'm actually going to choose the zip folder instead. The reason for this is a zip folder is a self-contained version of Blender that doesn't require installation on your system. Therefore, you can have one installation on your system, and then you can have multiple zip files of different other versions of Blender. As soon as Blender is finished downloading, go ahead and open it. Hit Next. And because I already have a version of Blender installed, it's asking if I want to change, repair, or remove. You'll probably just need to install it. Now go ahead and open up Blender and make sure everything loads properly. You can click on the splash screen, and if you use the middle mouse button, you can scroll around. By the way, that is something I haven't mentioned yet, and that is the fact that you need to have a dedicated mouse. You will not be able to effectively do anything in this course with a touch panel, touchscreen, or anything other than a mouse with at least 3 buttons. You also usually need a keyboard around as well because there are hundreds of hotkeys across all these applications, and if you don't use them, you'll be fighting these programs and spending hours longer than you need to create any kind of content. Now, as I mentioned before, you normally can't have multiple versions of Blender on your PC unless you do this trick with using the zip file. Go ahead and unzip that file. Once it's completed, go inside of the directory, and what you'll notice is a self-contained installation of Blender. You can even keep this on your flash drive if you like and take it around with you from computer to computer. Go ahead and double-click on blender.exe. And what you'll notice is we have a prior version of Blender now loaded and working just fine on our computer, as you can see here side by side. Next up, we're going to install some important programs that have become industry standard in the last few years. So let's try another search engine, and let's do Substance for Education. What you're looking for is a website that looks like this, substance3d.com/education. Once again, web URLs may change, so make sure you look for those keywords to find this page. And what you'll see is that with the creation of an account, you can get your own free personal license. Now, do understand that this comes with academic restrictions, so don't expect to use this material and make money off of it. But it'll be perfect for this course. So go ahead and fill in this information. Make sure you put down Rowan University, Glassboro, and of course the country is United States. Use your first name and your last name, and use specifically your Rowan email to validate that you are actually a student. Go ahead and submit it, and you should then receive an email explaining how you can download the software and how you can install your license. Usually you can download the software by itself, but just like Unity Hub, I highly recommend Substance Source, which is what you see here. Substance Source gives you access to all the different applications and conveniently lets you see which versions are available, which ones you have installed, and launch them from one central location. For this course, you're going to be installing Substance Painter and Substance Designer. Designer will be for creating procedural textures that can be manipulated using different sliders and values, almost like creating art through programming. Substance Painter, on the other hand, allows us to paint onto 3D models directly, as opposed to using other methods like Photoshop. With these two programs combined, you can create some really impressive assets. If you can, download both, install them, and then launch them to make sure they work on your system. Substance Painter particularly is notoriously difficult on older computers, so make sure it works now. And that's it for the different applications that you need to install for this course.